Hi everyone, today we are going to be going over ArchivesSpace, which is a web-based application used for cataloging archives. ArchivesSpace is an open source tool that archivists can use in archives administration. To be clear, it does not store the collections or digital objects themselves, but is specifically used for managing the metadata of those records. And according to the ArchivesSpace website, the application is designed to support core functions in archives administration such as accessioning, description and arrangement of processed materials including analog, hybrid, and born digital content, management of authorities and rights, and reference service. The application supports collection management through collection management records, tracking of events, and a growing number of administrative reports. The application also functions as a metadata authoring tool, enabling the generation of EAD, MARCML, MODS, MODS, Dublin Core, and METS, METS, formatted data. For some background on the software itself, ArchivesSpace is the integration of Archivist Toolkit and Archon, which were two previous applications which served similar functions as ArchivesSpace. ArchivesSpace was fully released back in 2013 and continues to be updated regularly, with the most recent update being last month in September of 2022. Today, it is used by a range of international institutions from large universities and state archives to smaller corporate and religious archives. It can also be useful for researchers as it allows users to view finding aids for collections and browse the materials in the system by using the search bar. It has been described as being created by archivists for archivists. Their mission statement is, ArchivesSpace is a community of mutual support committed to helping cultural heritage organizations foster access to and promote discovery of historical records and primary sources through the provision of sustainable and highly functional software and tools. There are several modules that archivists can use in ArchivesSpace for arrangement and description. You can create accession records, resource records, or digital objects. But how do you know what type of record you should create? We have created a flowchart that gives a short explanation and breaks down the relationship between accession records, resource records, archival records, and digital objects. It should also be noted that you can create a resource record either by creating a new resource record or by spawning the information from an accession record that you've previously created, although you might need to then add some additional information to complete the resource records. ArchivesSpace also supports the establishment of authority records categorized as subject, agent, and classification records to provide another layer of description. You can link authority records to accession records, resource records, or digital objects. There are some additional modules within the application that can be utilized in collection management. This includes assessments, collection management, events, containers, and locations. These would be used on a case-by-case basis, depending on their usefulness for a given archived material. Although we will not be covering these tools in the tutorial today, you can find a useful guide that breaks down these functions on the ArchivesSpace YouTube channel. Interested users can try out ArchivesSpace for free by using the sandbox. So by logging into the sandbox, you have access to a limited version of the application and can test out the interface and create some records. However, important to note, these records will not stay in ArchivesSpace permanently, as the sandbox is periodically cleared. Although the application itself is free to download and people can use certain functions for free, you do need a membership for full access to the program. There are 5 membership levels: very small, small, medium, large, and very large, and you do have to pay for this membership again. Today, however, we will simply be using the sandbox to test out some of the basics, so let's get started. Before we can start cataloging records, we will need to establish which manual we're using. This will dictate what information is relevant for our record. Each institution will have their own guide, depending on their own needs, but seeing as we are not an institution ourselves, we will borrow one for this tutorial. There are a number of institution-specific ArchivesSpace manuals available on the Society of American Archivists website. Each one of these guides uses different standards and instructions on how to input different records. Our manual is based off of the Virginia Tech ArchivesSpace Manual for Special Collections, version 1.5.
You can access the sandbox online for free without downloading anything. You can search for the ArchivesSpace sandbox in a search engine or the ArchivesSpace website, and you'll be brought to a page that explains the sandbox in more detail, as well as how to access it. If you want to skip right to the sandbox itself, you can enter the web address sandbox.archivesspace.org and navigate to that page. To log in, enter admin as both the username and the password. Once you've logged in successfully, you'll arrive at the ArchivesSpace homepage. Get your bearings by doing a quick search. In this tutorial, we'll be working a lot with maps. You can search the word map if you'd like and see what you find. When you're done looking around, you can return to the homepage and find the Create button, which we will be using a great deal. In this tutorial, you have two options for exercises to complete. You may complete a basic version in which you may observe creation of higher levels of records and only create a digital object, which you will attach a pre-existing agent and subject to, or will create those records to attach to your object. The links for the digital objects that fit in the collection we have created are in the manual labeled Digital Objects to Create. If you're up for a challenge, you may complete a more advanced exercise in which you replicate exactly our creation of all records and still create your own digital object as specified in the basic exercise. The links for the resource record and accession info for the collection we have created are in the manual labeled Advanced Exercise Resources. How to create an accession record. As you noticed earlier in the ArchivesSpace hierarchy chart, accession records are the foundation of a collection. They establish provenance. These records are not publicly available and there is no option to publish them. They're for institutional use to preserve the metadata pertaining to acquisition, processing, and physical location, among other things. Think of this as the place for metadata about the metadata in the records themselves. If you're following along in the manual, you'll notice our instructions here are fairly similar to avoid confusion. In this presentation, we may provide elaboration on why certain things are done, but we'll stick to the tasks as much as possible. If you're choosing to complete the more basic form of this tutorial, you can simply observe the steps in this section as you will only be creating a digital object and attaching or creating an agent and a subject to that object. If you're choosing to complete the more advanced form of this tutorial, follow along and fill in the specified fields as you go, as you will be making everything that is made in this presentation. Now, let's create an accession record together. First, navigate to the Create button and select Accession. Enter the title of the collection in the title box exactly as it appears in the source you're using to complete the entry. If you are devising a title for an unnamed or poorly named collection, make sure you keep it brief and informational. The data field should reflect today's date, unless you're working on items accessioned prior to today. At this point, you should save your record to avoid losing it due to a system timeout or computer error. You can re-enter the record and continue to edit. In the content description field, paste a pre-existing description for the collection, or write one from scratch that describes the amount of material in the collection and its format. In the condition description field, record any issues with the physical condition of the collection. If no such issues exist, leave this field blank. In the acquisition type field, select the mode of accession. If you are unsure, select unknown. In the resource type field, select the option that best describes the contents of the collection. In the section dates, select the date label. For our purposes, simply enter the date range for the collection as inclusive dates, with as much specificity as is available. In the section Extents, Select whole in the portion field. If the physical extent is known, enter it in the number, type, and container summary fields. If the physical extent is unknown due to the collection not being real and the nature of this exercise, default to 1 cubic foot in a single box. In the section Agent Links, add a minimum of 1 agent to be the creator of the record. In the section Related Resources and Accessions, add the related resource record. If you have not yet created that record, you may do so from this screen or return and attach it once you have completed it. In the section Subjects, add at least 1 relevant subject. If the subject you require does not exist, use the Library of Congress subject headings vocabulary to add a new one. Agents, subjects, and resource records will be covered in more detail later. Make sure to select Save Accession Record.
How to create a resource record. Normally, much of the information needed to create a resource record could be pulled from the parent accession record, but for the sake of practice, we will be making one from scratch. Again, navigate to the Create button and select Resource. Enter the title of the resource in the title box exactly as it appears, whether the record is for a collection, a subseries, or an object. In the identifier record, you may enter the accession number entered in the corresponding accession record if this is the only resource record you will be attaching to it. If not, enter the current year in the first box, the current month in 2 digits in the second box, the current day in 2 digits in the third box, and your own surname in the fourth box, followed by a single numeral representing which box number or resource record is described. In the level of description field, select Collection. In your own work, you will likely use other options as well, but for our purposes, resource records will capture the collection level only. In the language field, select English. In the date label field, ensure creation remains selected. In the descriptive dates field, select type inclusive dates and enter the date range for the collection with as much specificity as is available. In the section Extents, select whole in the portion field. If the physical extent is known, enter it in the number, type, and container summary fields. If the physical extent is unknown due to the collection not being real and the nature of this exercise, default to 1 cubic foot in a single box. For our purposes, ignore the section titled Finding Aid Data. However, you may wish to spend time after this exercise familiarizing yourself with this section, as a real resource record needs a complete and comprehensive finding aid to be useful. If you are creating this record after having created your accession record, you may use the Related Accessions section to search for and link that record to this one. As in the accession record, add at least 1 agent as creator and at least 1 subject. Save your resource record.
So again, normally much of the information needed to create a digital object could be pulled from the parent resource record, but for the sake of practice, we will be making one from scratch. To start, navigate to the Create button and select Digital Object. Enter the title of the object in the title box exactly as it appears. In the identifier field, enter the current 4-digit year, followed by the current 2-digit month and the current 2-digit day in the first box. Enter the first 2 words of the collection name in the second box, the year the object was created in the third box, and a unique 3-digit number to identify the object. Make sure to check the Publish box if you want the public to be able to use and discover this object. In the Type field, select the general format of the item, such as cartographic. In the Language field, select English. In the Date field, add the most specific single date for the creation of the object that you have available. Just like in the resource record, add at least 1 agent as creator and at least 1 subject. Then save your object.
How to create and link to a subject. Navigate to the Create button and select Subject. In the source field, select LOC if you use LCSH to create the subject. If you are creating a subject record not defined in LCSH, select Local. In the heading field, enter the exact name of the subject as defined by the authority source. If you are creating a subject record not defined by LCSH, enter the new subject with the same syntax as subjects defined by LCSH. In the type field, select the kind of subject you have entered. Click Create and Link to Subject. In the heading field, enter the exact name of the subject as defined by the authority source. If you are creating a subject record not defined by LCSH, enter the new subject with the same syntax as subjects defined by LCSH. In the type field, select the kind of subject you have entered. Click Create and Link to Subject.
How to create and link to an agent person. Navigate to the Create button and select Agent, then Person. In the source field, again select LOC if you use LCSH or Local for a person not identified in the LCSH. Name order may be left indirect in this case. In the primary name field, enter the person's surname. In the rest of name field, enter the person's first name and middle names. If necessary, fill out an occupation or location in the qualifier field to disambiguate the agent record from similar records. Finally, click Create and Link to Agent. How to create and link to an agent. Corporate. Navigate to the Create button and select Agent, then Corporate Body. In the source field, again select LOC if you use LCSH or Local for an agent not defined in LCSH. In the primary name field, enter the most basic part of the entity name. If necessary, add the more specific pieces of the name in subordinate fields. Click Create and Link to Agent. How to create and link to an agent, family. Navigate to the Create button and select Agent, then Family. In the source field, select LOC if you use LCSH or Local for an agent not defined in LCSH. In the Family Name field, enter the surname of the family followed by the word Family. If necessary, fill out the qualifier field to disambiguate the agent record from similar records. Click Create and Link to Agent.
So as we've seen, ArchivesSpace is a tool that allows archivists to manage collections according to their needs. As an online platform, it provides easy access for staff and researchers alike to browse the collections and finding aids. While this exercise is in no way exhaustive, it is a good way to warm up to the structure and format of ArchivesSpace. Hopefully, you've come away from this tutorial feeling more familiar with this great resource. If something tripped you up in this activity, don't be discouraged. There are whole conferences dedicated to learning how to best use all that ArchivesSpace has to offer. In fact, if you have any questions about how to do something not covered in this tutorial, there are tons of video tutorials available on the web, and more detailed manuals for using the tools in ArchivesSpace. We've selected a handful of these resources and attached them here. If you're interested in more functions of ArchivesSpace, these are a great place to start.